So now it's time to roll out our lasagna dough. We're going to make our lasagna sheets. And let me go ahead and get my pan out. This is the pan we're going to be using. And the dough, now that we've let it rest, is nice and squishy and supple again. So it's going to be very malleable, very great to work with in order to be able to roll it out. And look at that beautiful yellow color. That came from the egg yolks, and that's exactly what you want. Good quality eggs are going to yield that, but whatever eggs you got on hand, make it your way, it'll be just fine. So we're going to lightly flour our surface, and we're going to roll it out into a pretty big sheet. So if you got the surface area to work with, definitely make sure that you roll it out. Make sure that you are also flouring. I mean, this is non-stick, but I also like to put a little bit of flour on there that helps ensure it stays extra non-stick. So we'll go ahead and flop out our dough. And grab a little bit of flour because we want, our surface that we're working with. We definitely don't want anything to stick. Make sure we got it on both sides. Okay. And then, actually, before I forget this step, now I've done this before. I've tried to roll out a huge ball of pasta and it doesn't work very well. So what I'm going to do is cut off a section of it. And then make sure that you keep the rest covered as you're not working with it so it doesn't dry out and form a skin. But if you look at that inside, that's the texture that you want in a pasta dough. And I'll actually come to the camera and show you. That kind of texture right there is what you're looking for in a good pasta dough. It's going to give it a nice good chew and texture. So again, make sure it's nice and covered in flour, and we're just going to start rolling it out. Now to start, you can roll in one direction, begin rolling it back. It is easier if you do use a pasta machine. The pasta machine does all the flattening and stretching for you, but the real tradition, rustic Italian way is to do this by hand with a rolling pin. So that's what we're going to do. So we're going to begin rolling this out. And once you get it, nice and flat, you can start rolling it out in different directions. Now the goal is to try to make it round, but I'll be honest with you, I've never been very good at doing that, so I'm just trying to work with it as best as I can. Even more so important is to make sure that you got it even textured. I'm going to go ahead and flip this over and begin working out our dough. So right now, what I'm trying to do is make a good lasagna pasta sheet. You want it to have a nice thinness to it, but you don't want it, to be too thin, because if it's too thin, it'll fall apart when you try to cook it in the oven. Okay, flip it over again. Put nice, even pressure on your lasagna. And it's okay if it's not exactly the perfect shape. I'll show you how you can incorporate it into the pan. Give this one more flip. Give it a little bit more of a roll, and then begin working that into our pan. Now, before we actually place the pasta sheet into the pan, our sauce is actually ready, and what we're going to do is we're going to take a ladle, and we're going to ladle just a little bit of sauce into the bottom of the pan. Not much, but enough to coat, and you just kind of give it a quick push around to coat the bottom of the pan. And what this does is this ensures that your bottom sheet of pasta does not stick to the pan. bottom, probably should set this over here. The bottom of your pan should look something like that. Now, we have our knife, so we're going to go ahead and cut out a basic rectangular shape for our lasagna. As you can see, it's not super thin, but it's just substantial enough in order for us to be able to bake up a good lasagna. And I'll show you what you can do with these extra pieces here in just a moment. So you want a nice good rectangular piece like that. You want to go ahead and center it in your lasagna pan. Now what you can do is you can take some of these extra pieces and begin assembling them out along the edges of your pan where that piece didn't happen to touch. I could probably cut this down like so and fill in where I need. No waste. That's an important part, no waste. And the bottom of my lasagna pan now kind of looks something like that. So we're going to continue to do this again as we build out our layers. But for now, I need to go ahead and get prepared with our cheeses. I need to cut up some cheese and get ready to build the layers of our lasagna. So moving on to our next cheese, this is a fresh mozzarella. Again, I highly implore you to use the fresh and not the shredded that you find in the bag. The shredded that you find in the bag doesn't have the right moisture content, and it certainly isn't going to be the freshest, best quality. And if you can find mozzarella di bufala or buffalo mozzarella, that's going to be even better. It's such a creamy, sweet flavor. You could also, if you're familiar, substitute burrata, which is a mozzarella cheese, but it has a soft interior and it kind of melts once you cut into it. It looks like this, but soft interior and it melts out. Really, really good. Either one would be particularly fine, but again, I highly implore you to pick a great quality cheese. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and slice it. And this is roughly the thickness that you want, about half an inch, quarter of an inch or so. Definitely no bigger than a half inch. And we're going to need and want a lot of cheese. Now, these are kind of uneven, and they do tend to spread whenever you press your fingers against it, which is totally fine. That's going to become very helpful whenever we assemble our lasagna. Now, if you are hard-pressed looking for a good fresh mozzarella, you can use bocconcini, which are little tiny balls of mozzarella or pearl mozzarellas. Those are fine as well. Now, if you're here in Texas, most of the ingredients that I got today are available at Central Market. So, you know, definitely if you're looking for the finer ingredients to use, I would recommend going there. However, Kroger will have pretty much all the good staples it is that you need. I just need a piece of the cheese. All right, so our cheese is done, and I'm going to go ahead and roll out another piece of the pasta. I'm going to go ahead and cut off another bit there. Cover what I'm not using. Okay, I'm going to kind of form this up into a ball and reflour my work surface. Okay, make sure this is nice and floured and my rolling pin is nice and floured. All right, and then we're going to do the same thing. We're going to begin rolling out one way. I need to turn that for whatever reason it's wanting to move around on me. There we go. And kind of turn it. And just using a method of rolling out one direction and then rolling back the other direction. Applying even pressure as we're rolling out the dough, because again, We want to make sure that the texture, or rather, I'm sorry, the thickness is what is consistent. Okay, and once we get it into a good basic shape, we can flip it over and really start pushing it out in all directions. Now, if we were making egg pasta to cut it into, flat noodles, when we go to make and cut the noodles, we would actually, once we're done, throw them into a boiling pot of water for about 2 minutes to cook off any excess flour and to really get our noodles to the right consistency and temperature for eating and tossing with our tomato sauce. But in this case, these are going to be cooking in the oven because it is a lasagna, so no real need for that step. You can, but not necessary. Now, traditionally in the Emilia-Romagna area, whenever they make homemade lasagna, and especially when making it with their own fresh pasta, they add spinach into the dough. And I can show you in another video how to incorporate spinach into your dough. You're going to do it at the stage where you're mixing your flours before you make the well and add the egg. That's when you were adding your fresh spinach. And if you have a food processor, you're really going to need it for whenever you make a fresh spinach dough. Okay, I believe that's gotten to the right thickness that we want, so we're going to go ahead and do the same thing and cut out our basic rectangular shape. And one rule of thumb is you just want to cut off the uneven edges when you make your rectangular shape. Okay? Now, what we're going to do is we're going to build the first layer of our lasagna. So you can, at this point, go ahead and add in your bolognese. And we don't want the bolognese to be too thick. We definitely want it to be thicker than how we added it in the first layer. But I'll show you what that looks like here in just a minute. That pan is getting hot. Give it a nice good spread around. The meat is definitely going to be the main star of this show. So that's about the thickness that it is that you want in your sauce layer there. And then on top of this, we're going to add our bechamel. So it's kind of thickened up even a little bit here. Really don't need that anymore. So I'm gonna take a good sized spoon. If you have a gravy spoon, that works just as well. I have a big size spoon. You definitely don't want to use a slotted spoon. I can't find my big spoon, so I'll just use my gravy spoon here. And I'm going to add in a little bit at a time the bechamel. Just kind of, and I'll show you what this looks like here in just a second as you add it in, just adding it, over your lasagna surface. It's okay if it's relatively uneven, it's going to cook out in the sauce. Okay, and then we start adding in the cheese. So take a good handful of your Parmigiano Reggiano, okay, sprinkle that in, and I'm definitely going to have to grate more. should do it. And then begin taking your mozzarella and flatten it out with your hands, like so, and add that over your lasagna layer surface. Again, it's going to kind of melt out. It doesn't necessarily have to be in like perfect, even, pieces or whatever. You just want to make, get most of it covered. That's the main important thing, is that you get most of it covered. All right. And so that first layer of meat cheese is done. And the bechamel. So now we're going to add in our next layer of lasagna pasta dough. And you can cut off pieces as you need it to kind of fill in gaps. So now that we got another layer of noodles here, we're going to come back and add more meat sauce. And for any typical lasagna, you're going to want to build about 3 layers. Which is all I think this pan is going to be able to hold anyway. Ooh, can't forget the bechamel. Now, to your preference, you can certainly add more or less bechamel to your layers as you like. I like a good certain creaminess to my lasagna, and it definitely yields great complement to the bolognese. Might be all it's going to allow me to do. Okay. Going to need to grate just a little bit more Parmigiano Reggiano. And then sprinkle that all over. And then add a few more layers of mozzarella. Oops, just dropped a piece. And again, I'm just flattening it out with my hands, crumbling it up as I layer it over the lasagna. Okay? Now, if you wanted to stop here, technically you could, but everything's bigger in Texas. And it's lasagna. Everybody loves lasagna. So we're going to go ahead and add one more layer. And then this time we won't add bechamel to the top layer. We're only going to add the meat sauce and cheese. Okay. Almost done. And it's gotten quite heavy now. Take the last little remaining bit of any grated Parmigiano Reggiano that you have. That's not really what's important in the top layer as much as in adding in your mozzarella. Now with this top layer, you definitely want to cover more surface area with mozzarella because what we're going to do towards the end of baking time is we are going to broil it and give that nice brown to the cheese. At this point, I don't have very much left, so I can just kind of peel off what I need. Okay, so now this is ready to go in the oven. So I do recommend that you put it on a baking sheet. This is just in case anything happens to spill over. The baking sheet will catch it as opposed to it spilling in your oven. It'll also make it easier to remove in and out of your oven. 350 degrees for about 30 minutes. Depending on the heat of your oven, may take a little bit longer. You definitely want it to be bubbly. Remember, your meat, everything in this, with kind of the exception of the pasta, is already cooked, and your pasta is going to cook in the sauce when it's in the oven. Very heavy. There it is. And there we go. So about 30 minutes, give or take, and then after that 30 minutes, for the last few minutes or so, you're really gonna have to watch this because broiling can go very quickly. You're gonna broil the cheese on top. Thanks for joining me today. I hope you make it. If you do, drop a comment or a picture in my comments, because I definitely would like to see how you made this lasagna and how you made it your way. Thanks for joining Cooking My Way here in my kitchen. See you next time.